7 through 12. And I mentioned that first because getting out of the car, Lori said, make sure you tell us where we're going to be studying from, very first thing, and not wait midway through. I just can't help it. I'm sorry. So I guess the topic of this particular study will be patience and endurance. And I think we all will gather that pretty quickly from the reading. I'm not going to read it just yet, but do you all, I was just thinking, this is kind of petty patience thinking, everyday kind of thing. The definition for patience is being able to tolerate delay, trouble, or suffering without complaint. And endurance, the definition is the factor or power of enduring an unpleasant or difficult process or situation without giving way. So, do y'all remember when I was growing up? I don't know if you all are on the same did the same things that I did when I was young. But I used to spend the night with my grandmother. And we called her Mamaw. And it would be me, my brother, and my first cousin. Do you remember the yellow dome-looking popcorn maker? Do y'all remember that? Okay, so I had to look this up because I didn't remember the name. But I looked it up on eBay, and it said vintage West Bend popcorn popper, 6 quart, stir crazy yellow dome. We loved that thing. So you would put the oil in it, and it had to be like 30 minutes. And we'd stand there and look at the oil, and you would see, well, there's one bubble. It's getting hot. So then my grandmother would add the popcorn, and then it would pop. It was just so cool. But we would do that with the thought that we were going to watch TV, and my grandmother always had just Westerns. I guess it was just the basic, maybe 2 or 3 channels, I don't know. But do you remember when you turn the TV on? Actually, she would turn the TV on before she started the popcorn. And it would have to warm up. And then we'd sit in there, and on the tube, there would be a little dot. And it would get brighter and brighter. And we're like, oh boy, we're getting ready to watch TV. And then all of a sudden, it would just, you got your picture on there, and then there would be bars going up and down. And then we'd have to say, hey, Papa, come in here and adjust the TV. And there was something on the back, and those waves would get slower and slower. But we didn't mind. But what if we had to do that today? And then they came out with Jiffy popcorn. Hey, the popcorn, the kernels were already in the little aluminum little pan with, and you'd put it on the oven, and hey, it was quicker. It was Jiffy Pop. And then we got tired of that, didn't we? So then we got microwave popcorn, and now we can just throw it in there. And now you can just buy popcorn already popped. I mean, you just and we could have loaded up at Costco the other night, honey. So, and then, and I'm telling you all these stories, which I just think it's neat to think about and think back. The rotary telephone, it would take 5 minutes to dial a number, and then if you weren't very good at it, you would mess it up, and then you'd have to hang up and start all over. And then I remember, I grew up, my dad was a preacher, and my dad would spend hours and hours on telephone with people from the church. And then my mom, she was fed up with it because they would call her, and they would be on the phone for, it seemed like hours. You're like, Mom, I need to use the phone. She's talking to sister so-and-so. And then it got so that she just didn't want to talk because she knew when she answered that phone, she was going to be on the phone for an hour. So we had this secret code. Call once, hang up, wait 2 or 3 minutes, and then call again. Y'all have that same code? you knew it was a family member, and then you knew if you didn't want to answer it or not. And then the telephone cords were so short starting out, and then because we wanted to multitask, we had a cord that was stretched from the kitchen all the way to the laundry room, and that thing was all curled up and wound up. Well, we can't deal with things like that today. I really don't think we'd be able to handle it because we couldn't be patient enough. And, we're getting faster at everything we do. Everything's getting more modern. And I would say in 30 years from now, we're going to look back, maybe 40 years from now, and say, you remember when we used to carry those little things around in our hand, a cell phone? That's so old, Can't believe we used to do that. They're all looking at me. No, that'll never happen. But anyway, things in life, and when we're talking about patience is a choice. We have to choose to be patient. If we're going now in Maryville, if we're going across town, we have to make special arrangements for travel just to get through the 10 red lights we have now because it's bumper to bumper. If we don't, what do? We get angry, don't we? We're like, I should have left earlier, or I can't deal with this traffic, and so on, so on. What if, speaking of patience, what if you've had a medical diagnosis that's not favorable? You have to have treatments. It takes a long time. It takes patience to go through all that. I know Claire had the knee surgery, and I just felt so bad for her because it seemed like it took forever for her to heal up, but she was so patient. She got through it. And, things like that in life, we think, we got to be patient. Those are trials. Those are tough. But what about someone that has had a crime against their family, and they know that the person who committed the crime against their own family, they were victims, and now they have to wait. They have to wait for the trial. They have to wait for, time goes on and on and on and drags on, and it seems like there's no justice. There's no justice. So that kind of leads us into the book of James, what we're going to be studying about. At the very first part of this lesson, James says, be patient. So as far as our spiritual walk, we have to be patient. So when I study the New Testament scriptures, there's a few things that I always keep in my mind. And we should always keep these in our mind when we're studying because it helps us rightly divide. So obviously we know that there's Old Testament, New Testament. We know that there's different dispensations as far as how man was saved under the Old Covenant, how man saved under the New Covenant. And certainly, if you do any kind of evangelistic work, the thief of the cross is going to come up. It's inevitable, it's going to come up. So you have to understand, and you have to look from the vantage point of the writers of the New Testament, where they were at in relationship to the cross. We have to understand those things. We have to be able to know that, yes, Jesus had power on earth to forgive sins. He could say your sins are forgiven you. He had that power as the Son of God. We don't fall into that category as the thief on the cross did. We're under a different dispensation, if you will. We're after the cross, after the Great Commission, after Pentecost, on and on and on. So we know that we're going to look to the examples of those individuals that were saved this side of the cross. So we don't make our appeal to those under the old law, or even when Jesus was on earth. So that's one thing you have to keep in mind. Another thing would be you study the scriptures in light of the miraculous. So you know, Paul said in Romans chapter 1, he said, I long to come to you that I may impart some spiritual gift to you. And then Paul speaks to young Timothy. He says, stir up the gift that is in you from the laying on of my hands. We don't talk like that now. I don't say, Ken, stir up that spiritual gift in you. You know, we're not in the miraculous age. We all know that. It was for the edification of the church, the building up of the church, so the manifold wisdom of God would be made known through the church. That's in God's perfect plan. So we have to understand when we're reading the scriptures that we have to put the things that need to be in their proper place, miracles being one, the covenants being another one. And here's something else. It's not the only thing, but this is what's going to bring us or take us into our lesson, was AD 70. You know, we have to look at the times of these writings in the face of the Roman siege of Jerusalem. We have to understand that these individuals that James was writing to, they were getting ready to go through something very traumatic. Maybe not them personally. Maybe they were outside the walls of Jerusalem, but their family could have still been there. Think about that for just a minute. The terrible things that happened around AD 70 to the Jewish people, but they were warned. They were warned from the Old Testament on forward. And we're going to talk about that just a little bit. And then we're going to explore that. Let's read James chapter 5, 7 through 12. And I'm going to tell you there's going to be a lot of reading, but I think it's going to be worth it to you this morning. That way you can place this event in history in your mind when you're studying, and it'll give you a better picture of what they may have been going through. And why, James said, have patience, endure. We have no clue of what they went through personally. And we have our trials in our lives. We have things that test our patience and our endurance, and sometimes we just want to give up. But man, if you just really look at what they went through in the first century, it'll give you a better perspective. So I'm going to read James chapter 5, 7 through 12, and then I'm going to read some lengthy scriptures, and then we're going to read it again and see if it can help you refocus on what James is trying to convey to these individuals he's writing to. Therefore be patient, brethren, until the coming of the Lord. See how the farmer waits for the precious fruit of the earth, waiting patiently for it until it receives the early and latter rain. You also be patient. Establish your hearts, for the coming of the Lord is at hand. Do not grumble against one another, brethren, lest you be condemned. Behold, the judge is standing at the door. My brethren, take the prophets who spoke in the name of the Lord as an example of suffering and patience. Indeed, we count them blessed who endure. You have heard of the perseverance of Job